her what kind of a program she was looking for, and she said, anything that you'd like to do. We're just hoping for something sort of fun and zippy. Well, that did give me pause, because fun and zippy are not two adjectives usually applied to me. Tonight, here I am at my zippiest. I'm taking you through the development of the book, how I organized it, how I wrote it, edited, got it published, and am trying to promote it. And this is my assistant, Pat, who's manning the I had the idea for the book for a long time, but I couldn't. Linda is telling me to talk louder. Okay. I had the idea for the book for a long time, but I didn't have a lead character. And it took a while for me to figure out who that should be, because I couldn't move ahead without knowing who the book was about. I chose a reporter, Leah Nash. She is audacious and tenacious. She's very smart, and she's a bit of a smartass. I chose a reporter because I know what that's like, so I didn't have to do a lot of research on that. And I'm a little bit of a smartass, so I didn't have to research that either. But I needed to have Leah have a reason to follow through on this story. Now, every good reporter wants to find the answers, and they will do just about anything to get a story, and that is true of Leah. But I also gave her a personal stake in the book. She is upset and sad and guilty and all kinds of things about the death of her younger sister 5 years before the book starts. Then very early in the book, she gets a note from a dead woman who implies, Leah believes, that her sister's death was not an accident. And on that slender thread, she takes that and runs with it to the very end of the book. Now, when I started writing, I knew the beginning and I knew the ending. But everything that happened in the middle was really a result of the situations that I put Leah into and the way that she reacted to them. I wanted people to know Leah not just from what I said about her, but from her relationships with other people. So I gave her a set of friends. Her good friend Miguel is quite a bit younger than her, and he has a very sunny, optimistic outlook on life, which is almost the polar opposite of Leah, who has a darker view of humanity. But their interactions give the reader a chance to see a kinder, gentler side of Leah. Her oldest friendship is with Coop, and he knows her flaws very well, and he's a very steady, measured man. And that is a contrast with Leah's more volatile temperament. Probably her most important relationship is with her mother, who is a touchstone of sorts for her, who has taught her about being independent and persevering and still finding joy in a life that has faced a lot of troubles, as both she and her mother have. Now, other characters in the story sort of waxed and waned in importance as I did rewrites and did changes, but there is one who stayed constant throughout, and that is Courtney Fensterman, who is the receptionist without peer. And Courtney is the only character in the book who is actually based on a real person who would never recognize herself. Now, I chose to set the book in Wisconsin because I needed the geography. I needed a big river and high banks and curving country roads and small towns and some big cities. And I realized I could have found that in Michigan, but I wanted to set the story far away from my home territory because I didn't want people to try to match imaginary characters with real people in town, because I could see that ending badly in some cases. Now, the size of the town of Himmel, I needed it to be small enough so there would be intimate relationships with people, but large enough so there was some degree of anonymity. Leah doesn't know everyone in town, but if she digs around a little bit, she can find connections in a sort of 6 degrees of separation kind of way with most people. And in a small town, because we do all either know about each other or we actually know each other, we tend to think that we know everything that's going on and there are no surprises for us. And I wanted that sort of serene illusion of a small town that would cover some really dark secrets, and so that's where my Himmel setting came from. Now, when I wrote the book, I did not have a map of Himmel, but when I started work on the second one, I realized I needed to get Leah better situated in time and space, because I might have had her visit the newspaper in this location, and then I realized as I'm writing the second book, I put it on the other side of town, or I would put some other landmark on the north, and I put something on the south. So I did probably the world's worst map, which is not this, and I gave it to two graphic design friends of mine, Nancy and Dale Beach. Nancy is the woman who designed the cover of Dangerous Habits, and they put together this map that puts Leah in her place. And then they also did for me sort of a bonus of DeMoss Academy, where a lot of the action takes place. And it's kind of fun to look at it and imagine Leah and Miguel and other people traveling around there. Now, these two maps are not in the book. I will put them on my website, and I will be using the map, I think, in my next book if I can figure out how to do it. Now, mapping is not the only way to organize. When you're doing a book, you have to think of the big picture and try to keep everything together and moving. And there's a lot of advice about how to do that. There are books and there are blogs and columns, and I think I read all of them. And I discovered as a result that I am not an organized outliner, nor am I an inspired free writer. I am more of a plodding meanderer who has to constantly bring herself back to the beginning in order to move forward. So I had to figure out my own way of organizing, and what I did was get large sticky notes, big poster sheets, the kind you would use at an office retreat or a brainstorming session, and I posted them around my office. Then I divided the book into 3 sections, 100 pages each, and within each section, I had smaller chapters of 5 to 15 pages. And for the first 100-page section, I wrote down all the things that I felt needed to happen in that section. Like, I was laying the groundwork, developing relationships, exploring the question of whether Lacey was murdered or whether it was an accidental death. And when I finished that first 100 pages, I went back, I compared what I'd written with the things that I thought I needed to do, and in some cases I thought, oh yeah, I forgot that, and I put it in, and in other cases I decided, no, I didn't need that at all. And once I got that done, then I repeated the process in the next 100 pages, which was the point of the story where I wanted things to start moving faster, where Leah had to start formulating some theories of the crime, and I wanted to put her in danger at some point so that the readers would recognize that whether Leah had a really good idea of what was happening or not, she'd figured something out because someone wanted her dead. And once I got that part done, then I moved into the final 100 pages of the book, where I tried to drive the readers to a sense of urgency, to the climax that was coming. And Leah loses all hope almost at one point. Her job is gone, her theories have gone out the window, but because she's Leah, she grabs herself back together, she thinks about what she knows, and then she jumps ahead and does some crazy things that lead to the main climax of the story. Then in retrospect, or in a little slowdown period, she realizes there are some things she still does not understand, and as she thinks about it, that's when it comes together and she brings that second part of the story that brings all the pieces of the story together, and then we're at the end. And using those visuals helped me keep things in line. And I also had a big sheet of paper with the names of all the characters, their ages, and their jobs, so that I didn't turn a blue-eyed, blonde-haired banker into a red-headed, green-eyed lawyer who was a lot older, which actually I did do that sometimes. Now, while I was working all the time, I'm researching, because I think of an idea and I go, oh, is this really possible or not? And the internet makes that really, really easy. But if I ever do commit a crime, my Google searches will provide plenty of incriminating evidence about how to dispose of a body, how to get a hold of poisons, how to make murder look like suicide. But I also had some less scary searches, like when does the sun come up in Madison, Wisconsin in May, or how do you climb a rock wall? Now, that, as I said, the internet makes that really easy, but I can't say that it makes it quick. And the reason is, a quote I read says it really well. Being a good writer is 3% talent and 97% not getting distracted by the internet. And I find that it's really, really hard to do. Like, I might look up, how fast will a Beechcraft airplane go? 200 miles per hour. Okay, then I'll think, wow, when did the Concorde last fly?
Yeah.
That was October 24th,
Yeah.
2003.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, when did the Wright brothers fly a Kitty Hawk? December 17th, 1903. And then, how much are vacation rentals at the Outer Banks?
Yeah.
That way, many a morning passes with nary a word written, but a lot of information gathered. Probably my favorite part of writing is planting the clues. I just really enjoyed doing that. And I love mysteries, and I love surprises in mysteries, but I hate it when the killer turns out to be the neighbor who was in the first chapter, who doesn't show up again until almost the end of the book, and then, oh, what a surprise, he's the long-lost brother of the victim, and there we're all done. So that just seems unfair and tacked on to me. So I tried really hard to play fair with the reader and to give the readers all the information that Leah had. But I also tried to distract the readers so that they would make the same mistakes that Leah did. Because Leah is very smart, but she's very quick to judge, and she has a lot of personal biases, so as many of us do. Now, I put this together with the assumption that most people interested in coming would have read the book, and so I'm going to give some specific examples of clues, and if you haven't read the book but you think you might like to, you might want to step out and get a drink or cover your ears or hum softly to yourself. So if anybody wants to do that. All right then, spoilers ahead. When I started writing, I knew right away, before I even really started the story, I had the idea for a clue that was a different clue than it looked like. I wanted people to see something and think, oh, yeah, I got that, but really it meant something different. That's why I had a newspaper clipping with a photo of Max, the editor, and his family that Leah gets, but she zooms right over that because what she's interested in, what matters to her, is her sister and the guilt she feels over her sister's death. So she just jumps right to that story and makes the assumption that that's what it's about. But later, she's going to realize, and also the alert reader might file that away in their mind and then later see where that came from. Now, I knew that the Virgin Mary statue was going to be the murder weapon, which has nothing to do with my Catholic upbringing at all. But I didn't know what I was going to do with it, if I was going to hide it or what, until Leah talks to Sister Margaret, who tells her the sad story of losing her statue on the very day that Leah's sister Lacey disappears. Well, then I sent Leah over to talk to Father Hagel, and it wasn't until she got there that I realized we were going to find a big wall of statues there. And in that wall of statues, I could hide the murder weapon. And that is not an original idea with me. I read the story when I was a kid, the Purloined Letter, where a missing document turns up among a whole bunch of other documents and no one sees it because it's in plain sight. And I always thought that was what a cool idea, and so I found a place to use it. What I didn't know was that later at the end of the book, I realized I needed to make sure that Father Hagel or someone else couldn't say the statue was planted there, that he didn't have it, that it wasn't him. So that's when I went back and had Leah take a picture of the wall of statues and text it to Miguel as a joke, so that later she could use that as evidence that Father Hagel had the statue all along. Now, I didn't know the identity of Lucy's sexual abuser until about halfway through the book. I was playing around with Miller, Caldwell, or Father Hagel, or I even thought Max at one point. But then I read a story about a female basketball coach who had sexually abused her players. When I read that, I was like, wow, that's really surprising. And I realized that I had a gender bias about sex abusers, that it would be a man. And I thought, well, maybe readers will share my same gender bias and they will be surprised that the abuser is actually a woman. And so again, I had to go back in the story and beef up Karen's role and make her more prominent so there was a better relationship between the mom and Leah, so readers would have a chance at least to recognize it, and when they found out who it wouldn't be the neighbor who'd appeared in the first chapter and then showed up later. There was some groundwork laid for that. Once you get a first draft done, then the real fun starts. You have to do the editing, and the first edit that you do is a substantive edit where you look at the whole story. You try to see, does it hang together? Are there characters you don't need? Are there scenes that don't make sense? And that's a really hard thing to do, because after spending hours and days and weeks and months writing, boy, you feel like every word needs to be there. Nothing could possibly be cut. So you really need an outside person to help you with that. And I would suggest it shouldn't be your family, because your family is so happy for you that you finally finished this thing, that they're going to tell you it's fabulous. And I'm not saying you don't need to hear that, probably you do, but if you stop right there, that is the way to dusty death for your manuscript, because it's never going to get any better. So you need to find someone who can give you constructive criticism and who can withstand the wailing and gnashing of your teeth as you say, but that's really important. Because not everything is really important, and there are scenes that have to be cut and characters that have to go by the wayside. And it's a very emotion-fraught experience. When you get that done, then you move into the copy editing and the proofing, which are a lot less emotional. They're very closely akin. The copy editing is really looking at grammar and sentence structure and syntax and making sure that everything's right. And the proofing is really the nuts and bolts. Are there extra spaces in there? Is there wrong capitalization? Is there missing words? It's really tedious and painstaking, and yet really, really, really important, because it doesn't matter how good your story is. If your reader is going to get pulled out of it because there's typos, missing words, they're never going to really be able to engage with it. So proofing is horrible, torturous agony, but it's really important. And you also need an outside editor there, because it was in having a friend proof with me that I discovered I spell goodbye 4 different ways. G-O-O-D-B-Y, G-O-O-D space B-Y, G-O-O-D-B-Y-E, and G-O-O-D space B-Y-E. So I just read right over that a million times, but it takes an outside eye to do that, and it's well worth the time that you spend on it. Okay, so your manuscript's all done, and you're really feeling good about it, and now it's time to publish, and that's really good. But it can be a little bit bad, and it can even be a little bit ugly. There are 3 basic ways to get your book published. The traditional way is, like most of the books that you would see in the library, they're published by big firms like Random House or Simon & Schuster. And in order to get your book published that way, you need to find an agent. And to find an agent, you need to send out a query letter, and usually the first chapter of your book, and then you wait 3 minutes or 3 weeks or 3 months until you get an answer, and the answer is usually no, thank you. But sometimes it's, yeah, I would like to see your whole manuscript. So then you send them the manuscript, and then you wait 4 weeks or 4 months, or usually not longer than that, for them to say, yes, I would like to represent you, or no, thanks, time to start again. Now the problem with that, and the bad of that, is that a lot of times agents want exclusivity, which means you cannot submit your book to anyone else while they're reviewing it. So if they're holding on to it for 3 months, then you have basically ground to a halt as far as sending it out. And that really slows down the process. And then, once you do sign with an agent and they start offering it to publishers, that can take 3 months, 6 months, a year, or maybe never. So then you have the choice of putting your manuscript in a drawer or starting the whole process over again. So the bad part of traditional publishing is the length of time it takes. From the time you finish writing and start submitting till it's actually printed can be 18 months to 2 years or even longer, and that's really discouraging. So, but there are a lot of good things about traditional publishing, because all that stuff I told you about proofing, you don't even have to think about it if you are with, well, I mean, you do before you send it out, but you've got a whole army of people at this publishing house that are going to proof for you and design the book for you and do the book cover and promote it, and on top of that, you don't have to pay anything to have that done, and you get money. You're going to get an advance of from probably $5,000 to $10,000 for a new author in an untried area. Now, if you've got a blockbuster on your hands, then you're talking like $100,000, but or more. But most of us don't have a blockbuster on our hands. So those are good things, but the length of time is really frustrating to people. Oh, and you also owe your agent 15% of anything you make. So that's good and bad. So a lot of people, myself included, have turned to self-publishing, and that is really because the good part of that is it gives you a lot of control. When your book is done, you can publish it on Amazon, you can do it as an ebook, and you can do it as a print-on-demand print book. And that's good because you've got that immediate sense. But the bad part is you're responsible for everything. Not just the formatting and the proofing, but for the marketing and the selling, and that gets kind of ugly if that's not something that you're comfortable doing or knowledgeable about. It can be really difficult. But you don't need an agent for that, so you don't owe anybody any money, and it doesn't cost you anything to do that unless you choose to hire someone to do those services for you. The third way is contract publishing, which is basically you contract with a company for between $2,000 and $5,000, and they will print your book, and they will provide you a lot of the services that you get from a traditional publisher. They'll do editing and proofing and formatting and maybe even some marketing. But the bad thing is you have got to commit to printing several thousand copies of your book at least. So unless you have a big backlog of demand, you're going to have to find a place to store those books in your garage or your basement or your living room. And if you're not a real super salesman, you could be looking at those copies for a really long time. But the advantage is you set your own price for your book, and if you are a really good salesperson, you might make a fair amount of money doing that. Now, my advice to all writers is don't quit your day job. And I'll tell you why. Because even if you are one of the fortunate few who is published in a traditional publication format, you're not going to make a lot of money. If your book is a mass market paperback, which is the kind that you might pick up at Myers or the airport or whatever, and it sells for $6.99, you are going to get 6% of the cover price as your royalty. In other words, 42 cents of that $6.99 is going to go to you. And of that 42 cents, you owe your agent 15%. If your book is a trade paperback, which is the larger size, like Dangerous Habits is, it might sell for $12, and you're going to get 7 to 7.5% of that, which is 90 cents of that $12 cover price. If it's a hardcover that goes for $18, you will get 10% of that, or $1.80. So, and remember, you owe your agent 15% of everything that you make. So that's not super lucrative. Plus, you're earning out that advance that you got. You have to pay that back in terms of your royalties. So you're not really going to get any more money until the publisher has gotten his $5,000 or $10,000 back. And any books that are returned or remaindered or anything like that, that comes off of your cut that you're getting. Now, Amazon has attracted a lot of people because their royalties are much higher. For ebooks that are $2.99 or higher, you get a 70% royalty, which means you would make $2.09 on a $2.99 book. Books that are lower priced than that, you get a 30% return. So on a 99-cent book, you might make 30 cents, I guess. But do not do a happy dance yet, because when you are an independent author on Amazon, you are competing with over 800,000 ebooks, just like yours, excuse me, and 1.5 million print books. So the chance of you getting noticed is really, really small. So you might be getting this great 70% return, but you're only selling 7 books. So it's really still not that lucrative. Now, I mentioned that Amazon has a print version that you can do. It's called print on demand. And in that case, there are no books of yours inventoried anywhere. Instead, it's formatted, locked and loaded, ready to print as soon as someone orders it. Once they order your print book, you owe Amazon a set price for the actual printing of the book, a per page cost, and 40% of the cover price. So on a $10 book, you might get maybe $1.50, which is still better than traditional publishing, but it's not, again, you have that limited availability. And then, if you decide to opt for what's called expanded distribution, which means that bookstores and libraries can order your book from the same catalogs that they use to order, that Random House or Simon & Schuster uses, then you owe Amazon 60% of the cover price, plus all of the other charges. So all of a sudden, your $10 book costs you 46 cents every time somebody buys it, and that is not a good business model. So I did print on demand, and I set the price of my book high enough so that when a library or a bookstore orders it, I get 26 cents on the book of that $10.75. So now, if you are Sue Grafton or Val McDermott or Ruth Rendell or any of the bigger names, you are going to be able to negotiate a higher royalty than that. And on top of that, you've got 20 titles in print, and you're selling thousands of books a day, which even if you were only making 6% on 100,000 books, you know, you're still going to do okay. But it is very hard to get to those levels unless you're writing about vampires or zombies or 50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah.
So what is an independent author to do? Now, all you have available really is social media. And there's a lot of advice that you need to be on Facebook, you need to Twitter, you need to be on Instagram and Vine, you need to have a website and a blog. And all of those things are good ideas, but if they're not part of your normal everyday life, it's really hard to work around that. And if you're not very technologically savvy, it can be kind of overwhelming, which, believe me, it is. I do have a Facebook page, although actually it's just my regular page, but if anyone wants to friend me, feel free. I don't post pictures of cats or my cute new shoes, so you won't get a lot of posts. But you just have to do it, and I am hoping that for my next book I have a better planned promotion. This time out I thought, well, I'll just sell to all my sisters, and then they'll tell everybody, and then everyone will buy it, and then I will become rich and famous, but it did not work out like that. I do have a secret weapon. My husband, Gary, has no reservations about accosting strangers or friends and twisting their arms to buy my book, and he has actually pushed out quite a few that way, and thank you. But he doesn't have a wide enough reach for me. So, one thing that you can do, one thing I have done, is you can pay, and it's fairly inexpensive, you pay to appear in newsletters that people subscribe to and say, yes, I would like to hear about new books in mystery or biography or whatever you like. But the problem with that is the newsletters get subscribers by promising a substantial discount. So if you advertise, you usually have to price your book at 99 cents in order to get out there. And you may sell, 300 or 400, but, at 30 cents, that's really not going to take you too far. But at Amazon, I have to be fair, they do have a program, a sort of indentured servitude kind of thing, where if you sign up with them exclusively, then 1 week, every 3 months, you can price your book at 99 cents and still get a 70% royalty on it. But it's something that has to be done. I'm not very good at doing it. I never made my quota selling Girl Scout cookies, and I probably have not made my quota selling books, but I'm trying, so. One thing that does help, and that I am fairly shameless in asking for, is reviews. Because if you get reviews that are good, and a large number of them, that does help move you up on Amazon's algorithms, so that when someone types in new mystery books, you may come up a little higher than you did without any reviews. And if someone does stumble across your book, and your book has 100 reviews and another person's has 10, they're more likely to buy your book thinking, oh, that must be a better book because, that has 100 reviews. So if anyone would like to review my book, you can do so on Amazon or Goodreads. And if you'd like to, but you don't know how, call me and we'll talk. So I have on the table over there some business cards that will take you to my website, or you can email me if you'd like, or follow my blog, or and I post a regular newsletter. I say regular, I've done it once, but I'm going to do it again, which says what's happening with the next Leah Nash book, which I am in about halfway through writing that. So and I'm planning to have that done to come out sometime in the fall. So that pretty much wraps it up for me, and I'd open it up if anyone has any questions.